for most of human history, the foods that were available to us were fruits, vegetables, meats, and seafood, and then nuts and seeds sparingly. And they also periodically had some things like honey. But those other foods that I just talked about were the primary foods, and that should really be the bulk of our diet.
Well, hello, everybody. I have a special guest with me today. This is a really important episode, and I've got Trevor Connor with me today. He is the CEO of the Paleo Diet, LLC, and he's got a lot of information to share with us today. And as you all know, I help people reverse their multiple sclerosis. And the paleo-based diet is what helped me reverse mine. So I'm so excited to have somebody on who has deep smarts about this diet. So thank you for coming, Trevor.
Well, thank you for having me. But as I said, I'm really looking forward to this. So I think we're going to enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about your story. So can you tell us about how you got into this segment, like this career?
It was a little bit accidental. So I was a professional cyclist for a lot of years. I'm Canadian, so I was training at the National Center up in Canada. And as I was getting to the end of my cycling career, mostly because I was starting to have some health issues, I was getting sick all the time, so I just couldn't train as effectively. And I was in my late 30s, so said, that's just the way it is. That's what happens when you get to that age. So kind of semi-retired and went back to school and came down to CSU where Dr. Cordain was a professor. I was really looking to study exercise science, but his class was one of the requirements. And I still remember walking in and everybody was talking about the paleo guy. And I remember just going, the what? Who? Had no idea who they were talking about. So was interested in taking his course and took it my first semester there and absolutely hated the course because I had been studying traditional sports nutrition for years and everything he was saying was against what I had been learning and hated it so much. So I took that course in the spring. I actually spent the summer trying to prove him wrong. And in the course of trying to prove him wrong, I would go through the research and go, well, actually, that kind of makes sense. But this other thing has to be wrong. And I'd go and look at that and go, well, okay, that kind of makes sense too. And as I was doing that, I was slowly putting myself on the paleo diet without realizing it. And that year, I stopped getting sick. I started to be able to train harder and went to Canadian Nationals at the age, so literally on my 39th birthday, and missed third place by a wheel length. They caught me right on the line. But next year when I was 40, I went back to racing with a pro team and got myself ranked in the top 10 in the country. And that was 100% the diet.
Wow. It's amazing what diet can do.
It's huge.
And so tell me what things you thought were not correct when you were learning from Dr. Loren Cordain.
When you study traditional sports nutrition, it is all about carbohydrates, 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 and lots of simple sugar. So I was being taught I needed to consume 800 to 900 grams of carbohydrates a day, which if you do the math, that is a ton of carbs. And there's no way of getting that without doing lots of goos and gels and sports drinks and stuff like that. So, I was probably consuming several hundred grams of simple sugar, just added sugar every single day. And it got you away from more natural foods. I mean, as a cyclist, we were taught dinner every night is 2 pounds of pasta. And breakfast is 2 bowls of cereal and things like that. So I just wasn't eating very healthy food.
Wow.
But we were told that's what was healthy. That was the best diet.
I can relate to that because, we were taught according to the food pyramid, the old one, remember, that came out in 92. I was eating Raisin Bran every morning for breakfast, thinking it was healthy, getting my, my bran and my milk, my calcium but it was loaded with sugar too. So it was, I call it the three sins, right? The dairy, the milk is dairy, the gluten and the sugar, which I was poisoning myself and I didn't realize it. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, I was the exact same thing. I was eating 2 bowls of cereal every morning and thinking it was healthy for me. And actually, one of the things I loved is when I got to CSU, the nickname for Dr. Cordain was the cereal killer. Because he was anti-cereal. He was actually telling everybody that Cheerios are bad for you. And nobody could believe this.
That's really interesting. That's funny too. I love the pun there. Okay, so after you took his class, what happened after that?
Like I said, so then I kind of saw that resurgence of my cycling career, and that's something that I've really enjoyed. I mean, I think I'm finally done doing pro races, but I did my last one at the age of 53.
Wow.
So kept it going for a while. But I ended up doing my thesis with Dr. Cordain, and we actually looked at the impact we were specifically looking at wheat, but really the people that we had in our study were all people that had gone on the paleo diet, and we were looking at the impact of the diet on autoimmune disease. And we spent, I ended up taking like 2.5 years to write my thesis. I had to go and learn immunology before I could even write it, but just saw really sharp and kind of exciting results in people that had made this change. So, I mean, there was one, it was a patient with Crohn's who tried the paleo diet, and she had sent us the communications with her doctor or GP. And first communication, the GP had put it, she sent me the doctor's notes, and the doctor had put in the notes, patient has decided to try a diet that I recommend against. I see this as dangerous, but was unable to convince the patient not to do this. And then like 6 months later, patient is still continuing to go against my recommendations and follow this dangerous diet. We've seen improvements in the condition. 1.5 years later, no signs of the condition, continuing to remain on this diet. I have no explanation.
Wow. Isn't it incredible how doctors are not taught about nutrition in school, or lifestyle for that matter? It's amazing what they don't know.
It's one of those, I don't mind that they aren't. So, I mean, I've also, towards the end of my cycling career, I got into coaching, and have coached a whole lot of cyclists and really enjoyed coaching. But there's a lot of other things that cyclists need, like they need to be fit on their bike. I would never go and try to fit an athlete because I'm a coach, because I haven't been trained in bike fitting. And that's the one issue I have with doctors, is they should be saying, I'm not trained in nutrition, but they should find dietitians and nutritionists that they trust, that they could work with, and tell their patients, you should work on your diet. I can't give you recommendations. You need to talk to this person. But instead, they try to often tell their patients that they understand nutrition and give recommendations, when really they're not giving it from a place of expertise.
Yeah, no, I agree with you totally. But I think they should get the basics right of good food and nutrition, and then hand it off to a health coach, like you and I. That way, we can help our clients stay accountable, and really, because there's a lot to it, right? So I want to tell you this too, Trevor. I live in Fort Collins. So
you were saying that.
Yeah, so Colorado State University is in my hometown. So 2 of my kids graduated from that college. And I also know that, and my daughter-in-law got her degree in dietetics there. So I know that Colorado State University is really big in nutrition and dietetics, which is fantastic. But the other thing that I find really interesting, and you told me this, and it's on your write-up too. So Dr. Loren Cordain is the one who did he patent it or register the name, the Paleo Diet? He's the one that really came up with it. Is that right?
This was his concept. So yeah, no, he got the trademark on it. I'm now the owner of the trademark on the Paleo Diet. He handed that off to me, and he
Right.
still works with us. I actually get up there all the time to go grab lunch with him and see how he's doing. But yeah, he wasn't a professor in nutrition. He was a professor in exercise science, and he
Ah,
was a very avid runner, and decided he wanted to learn more about nutrition, to basically help his running, and just started reading the research on the side. And one of the things I really admire about him is he went in with no bias. I've been in the nutrition world long enough to see there are so many people that go and study nutrition, but they go, I'm a carnivore, or I'm a vegan, or I'm this, or I'm that, and I want to go and find the evidence that my approach is right.
mhm.
He had no approach. He just wanted to see what the research says. And if you've ever met Dr. Cordain, he is a scientist through and through. I mean, I had to laugh when I took over the business from him. He sent me the financial statements for the business, and he had null hypotheses in the financial statements. He tried to do the finances like a scientific research study. It was funny. It's just, he is the most brilliant scientist I've ever met, but he can't think outside of that world. And he spent 15 years reading the research on nutrition,
Mhm.
and at the end of all that just basically said, here's what the research shows. And that was the Paleo Diet concept. And he wrote a couple reviews on it. It was his wife who said, you really need to put this in a book, because if you put in just in a couple reviews, scientists will read it, nobody else is going to read it, and people need to hear this. So he wrote the books, but there was never an ulterior motive. He was just a scientist trying to get good information out there.
Wow, that's incredible. And you and I talked before I hit the record button, but I also told you that I followed the Wahls protocol, right? And you said, so tell me more about this, because you said that he had conversations with Dr. Terry Wahls. So tell me about that. What do you know? What did he tell you about that?
I mean, that's something, unfortunately, he would have to tell you more about, because I know they worked closely together. I think they even published a study or two together.
Okay.
But they worked pretty closely together before I got to know Dr. Cordain. I came in towards the end of his career. So, sorry, there's a quick tangent, but our chief science officer is Dr. Mark J. Smith. So Mark was Dr. Cordain's first graduate student, and I was Dr. Cordain's final graduate student. So we always joke, Mark got him excited and I made him retire. But I know early on that he worked a lot with Dr. Wahls, and I actually recently had a few back and forths with her, because we just published a book, and she wrote a review of our book, and was pretty excited to do that. So I know, very friendly relationship between the two of them, and I know Dr. Cordain helped her with her research, and I think she helped Dr. Cordain as well. So very, very similar principles.
I love that. Okay, so let's get into the paleo diet. So can you just go over the basics, and then I've got some questions for you.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I try to get this down to really simple concepts. It is basically just eating the way our bodies were designed to eat. And yes, understanding every one of us is unique, and there has to be some personal exploration and experimentation to find what's perfect for you, which is why there is no one paleo diet.
Yeah, I agree.
This is more principle based, but the principles are, for most of human history, the foods that were available to us were fruits, vegetables, meats, and seafood, and then nuts and seeds sparingly. And they also periodically had some things like honey. But those other foods that I just talked about were the primary foods, and that should really be the bulk of our diet. Which, I always tell people that, and they go, well, that's what I was taught in kindergarten. I go, exactly. It's actually not that out there an idea. But it's also moving towards eating less processed, just whole nutrient dense foods. And Dr. Cordain talks about this all the time, the importance of nutrient density. And those foods that I just gave you are our most nutrient dense foods. Where unfortunately, he and I actually created a table where we looked at the common foods in every food category and assessed them for nutrient density. And those 5 that I just told you, they were top of the list. Except for nuts and seeds, because nuts and seeds have a huge amount of calories in them. It's a different conversation. But basically, bottom of the list was legumes, dairy, and grains. Grains have the lowest nutrient density of any food that you can eat. So just focusing on nutrient dense foods, focusing on less processed. I was actually just on a call with a couple of the people over at Non-GMO who are now doing a non-UPF certification. And I love what they're doing. And I said this to them, that I will make the argument that if you get processed and ultra-processed foods out of your diet, you by necessity have to eat a paleo diet. So if the trend is for everybody to just get away from processed food and eat more natural whole food, and they never use the term paleo again, I'll be happy. People are moving in the right direction.
So here's a question for you. Because, the Wahls Paleo added a few grains, meaning like rice and quinoa and some gluten-free items. So really those are not paleo, right? Like the real paleo diet, those are really not a part of it, right?
They're not. And I always tell people, here's the pure paleo diet. And then I have a conversation with them, because it's not a case where it's a black and white, where a food is really bad for you or a food is really good for you. Kale's great for you. If all you eat is kale, you're going to get sick.
Yeah.
I'm Canadian, so I like to tell people, probably the closest thing to something that is just purely evil is poutine, as much as I used to love the taste of it, which is for anybody who doesn't know, it's French fries with gravy and cheese curds.
Oh, yeah. Not so good.
Not so good for you. But it's a continuum. And a lot of these foods lie in different places on the continuum. So, for example, rice, yes, we're against grains. A lot of the grains, particularly wheat, are very high in anti-nutrients that can be damaging to your body. And like I said, basically what I was looking at is how these anti-nutrients can lead to autoimmune conditions in wheat. And I would say to anybody with an autoimmune condition, you just stop eating wheat. The impacts that wheat has on our inflammation, on the processes that lead to autoimmune disease is extraordinary. Rice doesn't have those anti-nutrients. So if you're going to pick one of those grains, I'd point you towards rice. The issue with rice is it's a very high glycemic index food. It doesn't have a lot of nutrient density. So it's calories, it's going to spike your insulin, and you're just not going to get much nutrient value out of it. Quinoa, one of the anti-nutrients that we were talking about is saponins, which can be very damaging to your gut. Quinoa has the highest concentration of saponins of any food in existence by an order of magnitude.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So I generally tell people, don't eat quinoa.
Okay. That's so interesting, because you hear that it has a lot of protein.
It does.
And then people always ask me about the beans too. So you said beans lack a lot of nutrients. Is that right?
So they're low in nutrient density. Beans also are very high in anti-nutrients. I mean, one of the ways you can tell if a food is high in anti-nutrients is, can you eat it raw? If you went into a wheat field and tried to eat wheat raw, you would be violently sick for days.
Yeah. Well,
same.
And it's like needles. It's like eating needles. You can't just take a piece of wheat and eat it.
It wouldn't be a very enjoyable experience all the way around.
Yeah.
But beans are the same thing. If you tried to eat beans raw, you would get very sick. So beans have to be soaked for at least a day, which tends to get a lot of the anti-nutrients out, and then processed and cooked so that they're edible. And the counter argument we've always heard against this is, well, the processing and the cooking gets rid of all the anti-nutrients. But the research I've read, it gets rid of most of the anti-nutrients, but a small percentage remains. And that's actually really bad for us. It causes it to kind of fool us, because again, if you ate it raw, you would never eat beans or wheat again.
Yeah, that
You
is
you
true.
you would have a very bad experience and go, I'm never eating that again. Instead, we eat it and the concentrations are so low, you don't get immediately sick. But
Mm,
these anti-nutrients cause disruption to your immune system, disruption to your gut that you don't immediately feel, but over time it adds up. And that's when you start seeing chronic disease. And it's very hard to put two and two together because you go, well, I've been eating wheat for a decade. So how could that now be causing this disease that I just got?
yeah, yeah. Well, because it was a slow progression,
Hmm.
right?
Right. So I don't know how much you want me to get into the science, but so stop me if I'm going too deep. But are you
Okay.
familiar at all with the work of Hans Selye?
I am not.
So Dr. Hans Selye is kind of one of these revolutionary researchers of the 20th century that a lot of people haven't heard of. I mean, to give you an idea of his impact, before Dr. Selye, the word stress was only used by engineers. It was a very specific term about it, like if you put a brick on a piece of wood, the pressure that the brick is putting on the wood is called stress on the material. And that was the only way it's used. Dr. Selye brought it to biology and psychology. So anytime you say, I'm stressing about a presentation tomorrow, you can thank Dr. Selye for that. He was the one who brought the term stress over. He
Wow.
also was the one who named and really identified the roles of most of the catecholamines in our body. So for people who don't know the science, adrenaline, things like that, that was Dr. Selye. But, and sorry, I'm going too deep. I'll give you the very brief explanation. He spent decades coming up with something called the generalized adaptation theory, where he exposed mice and rats to very small quantities of different poisons to see how their body would respond to what he eventually started terming a stressor. And what he saw was initially there was a negative response to the stressor, but then you would go into this adaptation phase where you would be able to handle the stressor, and it didn't seem to have any impact on your body. But the negative consequence was you couldn't handle other stressors as well.
Mm,
But after a period of time, you would go into what's called the fatigue stage, where your body would lose its ability to handle that stressor. And then you would start seeing all sorts of diseases like elevated blood pressure, diabetes, and multiple other conditions. And so he theorized this is what's behind most of the chronic diseases that we're seeing in people, is that there's some sort of chronic low-grade stressor that we're being exposed to that over, so in mice, it took like a year, which translated into humans could be a couple decades.
sure.
It took a long time to go from that phase of adaptation to the fatigue phase. In our theory, we kind of grabbed this for the paleo diet. We said it's these things like wheat and beans with their anti-nutrients that it's a very low grade amount of this stressor. So you don't immediately feel the effects. But by the time you get into your 40s and 50s, you start seeing these chronic diseases, and it's really hard to put two and two together.
Well, that makes total sense to me. Um, can we go back to, because there's a couple more categories in the paleo
Hmm.
diet I wanted to ask you about. What what science did you find out, or did Dr. Loren Cordain find out about dairy?
Oh boy. You know, I've read
Is
this
that
article we have a 5,000 word article on our website about
okay? I'm
milk
thinking that's
that
like a
Dr. Cordain
podcast in
wrote.
itself, right?
It is a full podcast. I have read it 3 times and I still don't remember all the details that Dr. Cordain brought out. But you see multiple effects with dairy. One is it can really spike our insulin.
Okay.
It has a very unique relationship with insulin. Um, Another thing that's really important for people to understand with dairy is, you know, you see out on social media people going, oh, the food industry, they're adding hormones to our dairy and it's causing all these effects and those effects. No, they're not. The hormones were already there. This is a really interesting and neat thing that Mother Nature built into how we raise infants is When a child is born, it initially doesn't produce much of its own growth hormone. And there's a reason for that. It's because it's reliant on its mother for food. And quite often in evolutionary times, we didn't have enough food for the mother to both survive herself and to fully feed the infant. So if they were in a time of food scarcity, what would happen? So sorry, just take a step back. We are designed to have these hormones in our dairy to spark growth in the infant, so that if the mother is not getting enough food, she produces less of the growth hormone, and then the infant grows slower because that then ensures its survival. So there is in dairy a lot of natural hormones, and they're not human growth hormone, they're actually bovine growth hormone that are designed to promote growth, and we're just not designed to handle those. So that can lead to a lot of negative health consequences, particularly in adulthood.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with you. How I explain it is, when we're 3, 4, 5 years old, we wean off the milk from our mothers, right? Because we lack the lactase to digest the lactose. And why are we eating or consuming milk as adults from a different mammal? It's weird if you think about it that way, right? So that's how I kind of explain it to my clients. And then when I explain it that way, then they think, oh, you're right. That is kind of weird.
We are the only animal on the face of the planet that drinks A, milk in adulthood, and B, milk from another animal.
Yeah. It's strange.
It is a little weird, but I mean, people love it. That's the problem. Convincing people.
I know.
You have to give this up.
It's the cheese that my clients miss the most. It's the cheese, right?
Well, here's another really important one that I tell people about cheese. A lot of we that osteoporosis is becoming an increasing issue now, particularly as people get older, and it's an issue more in women than men. What they've really happy to dive into the science if you want, but really what they're showing is it's the acid load on our bodies that causes osteoporosis. It's not a lack of calcium in our diet; it's acid load. Because calcium is the best way to bring back up our pH when pH gets too low. So, I mean, you take a Tums when you have an acidic stomach. Tums is just a piece of calcium. It's just powdered calcium. And what's the best sort of calcium in our bodies? It's our bones. So if your blood starts getting acidic, you start leaching calcium from the bones to raise the pH. There's a metric called the PROW value of foods. It's proximal renal acid load. And that shows how much of how much a particular food increases the acidity of our blood. And top of the list in terms of PROW values by a significant amount are cheeses. And it kills me because you see osteoporotic women who are being told by their doctor, eat cheeses because there's a lot of calcium in it.
Yeah.
The calcium isn't helping their osteoporosis, and the cheese is contributing, and it just kills me when I see that.
Well, thank you for explaining that. I didn't know that. So that's great information. Now that we're talking about calcium, because I know that calcium, I get a lot of my calcium from the greens that I eat. Can you explain a few other foods that have calcium that maybe you like to eat?
The best sources are green leafy vegetables.
Okay.
And what I will tell you is what is, in my opinion, and what I see in the research, what is more important than the absolute quantity of calcium you're getting is the calcium to magnesium ratio. There are hundreds and hundreds of studies on this showing that we need a calcium to magnesium ratio of 2 to 1. Most Americans get too much calcium and they don't get enough magnesium, particularly in women, because their doctors tell them to take a calcium supplement. The average American gets about 4.7 to 1, so way more calcium than magnesium. And like I said, hundreds of studies showing that if you're calcium to magnesium ratio goes much over 2 to 1, you start seeing all sorts of heart conditions, all sorts of issues with the heart.
Interesting.
Likewise, if it drops too much, like you drop to 1 to 1, you'll start seeing heart issues as well. But that's less damaging than the too high on the calcium to magnesium. And so I always tell people, get your calcium from green leafy vegetables because it also has a lot of magnesium and you get it in the right ratio. Going
Okay.
back to the issues with dairy, dairy is 20 to 1.
Wow.
So you do not get nearly enough magnesium and you're getting too much calcium.
Mhm.
And something they don't report on a lot, and I don't know why. This is also in the research.
Mhm.
Women have now matched or exceeded men in heart disease. I mean, if you remember
Wow.
back in the
I didn't
80s,
know
heart
that.
disease was a male issue.
Huh.
Women have now matched men, and the theory in the research is because women are getting too much calcium, not enough magnesium.
Interesting. Yeah, I just did a podcast on how important magnesium is. And I
Mhm.
take magnesium just because, well, I realized actually it was about a year and a half ago, I was getting lots of Charlie horses, like cramps in my
Mhm.
leg as I was sleeping. And I figured out, I'm like, oh my God, I don't think I have enough magnesium.
Magnesium.
So yeah, yeah, it can cause cramping, right? Or what else can it cause?
Well, so magnesium technically in the body is something called a cofactor. So it helps processes in our body, and it's involved in over 200 processes. So kind of the answer to your question is, if you're magnesium deficient, what isn't it affecting?
Ah,
It
yeah.
affects processes all over your body, but particularly a lot of processes in your muscles. So yes, if you're magnesium deficient, you're going to have weakness, you're going to have pain, potentially cramping. There's going to be all sorts of issues. But yeah, whenever anybody asks me, "Oh, what's the consequences of magnesium deficiency?" I just sit there and go, "I don't even know if I have the time to tell you the whole
Because
list. It's huge."
yeah, because it helps us regulate so many systems in our body,
Yes,
right? Yeah, yeah. I did
exactly.
explain that in my podcast. Yeah, I learned a lot when I was doing research on that. So that's so interesting. Okay. Is there anything? Oh, I know what else I wanted to ask you about. Okay, fats, good fats,
Mhm.
right? We need good fats in our diet. So tell me what you would recommend, where to get the good fats.
Well, again, you tend to find if you eat natural whole foods, you're going to get the right types of fats. One of the examples I love to tell people is a study that Dr. Cordain did early when he was researching the paleo diet was to look at the fatty acid composition of game meat, grass-fed meat, and then feedlot meat. And the fatty acid profile of the three meats was completely different. You see a lot more omega-3 fats in the game and grass-fed meat. You see a lot more saturated fat in the feedlot meat. Again, here you have really important ratios. One of the most important ratios in our diet is omega-3 to omega-6. Everybody likes to look at saturated fats and say, get saturated fats down, but you really need to focus on that omega-3 and omega-6 as well. And a lot of nutritionists will say there's no such a thing as too much omega-3, but there is such a thing as too much omega-6. It's not saying we don't need omega-6. It's just a lot of us have too much omega-6, not enough omega-3. And again, happy to go down this road and explain the physiology behind this. But if you go to the store and buy Tylenol, Tylenol is what's called a cyclooxygenase 2 receptor inhibitor. So cyclooxygenase 2 is a molecule that we produce that basically causes pain in our body. And if we get too much omega-6, we produce a lot of it. If we get a lot of omega-3 and less omega-6, we produce cyclooxygenase 1, which is anti-inflammatory. So really good reason to get omega-6 down, get your omega-3s up. But what I'll say overall about fatty acids, we're always trying to find a boogeyman of this one's bad for you, that one's good for you, and everybody's arguing about which one is bad, which one is good. I see it differently. All all the cells in our body, their membrane is made of fatty acids. We have all sorts of different molecules and particles in our body that likewise have a fatty acid membrane. And we need to be building those membranes all the time. And our body has a really neat way of saying, I would like to be using this fatty acid to build this membrane, but if it's not available, I'm going to use whatever fatty acids are available and just create a less than optimal cell or a less than optimal particle. So I always explain to people, it's like a Lego set where omega-3s might be the 6-piece block and omega-6 might be the 2-piece block and saturated fatty acids might be the flat block. They're all different and we need all of them if we're trying to build something out of Lego. And if you don't have enough of the 2-piece block and more of whatever other block, you can still build what you're trying to build. It's just not going to look as good and it's not going to function as well.
Sure, sure.
So we need all these fatty acids. We need saturated fats. We need omega-6. We need omega-3. We just need them in the right ratios.
Yeah, I agree. And tell me what your opinion is on this, because I tell my clients, I tell them, I said, well, don't worry too much about whether the fat's saturated or not, saturated. But what you want to look at is eat the grass-fed beef, eat the natural, organic chicken, wild-caught fish, right? And then coconut oil is saturated, which is a good fat. So that's why I don't really understand, because you hear a lot of people say, well, stay away from saturated fat, but there's good fats that are saturated. Do you agree?
Right. So that's what I'm saying. We need all of them.
Okay.
We just need them in the right ratios. And
right.
For anybody who's sitting there going, well, okay, well then tell me the right ratios and I'm going to supplement my way there. It's not possible. When we talk about saturated fats, there's dozens of different types of saturated fats, dozens of different types of omega-6, bunch of different types of omega-3s, bunch of different types of monounsaturated fats. And if you try to figure out the exact ratios of each one of those and then think you're going to supplement your way there, never going to happen.
Yeah.
So this is one of the reasons we say you need to eat natural foods, because those natural foods are going to have all those fats in the ratios that you need them.
Yeah. I totally agree. Yeah. If you eat right, you're going to get the right ratios. So let me ask you this. So what would you suggest people, what kind of oils to tell people to cook with?
Yeah. And that's always been a challenging one, because I get messages all the time saying, Paleo diet is about eating the way our ancestors ate. Our ancestors didn't cook in oils. And so that's against the Paleo diet principles. And my response is, yeah, you're kind of right. To some degree, if we were purists about the Paleo diet, I would be saying, don't use any sort of cooking oil. And unfortunately, this was the reasoning that led to the raw Paleo diet, which I'm glad has kind of died.
Okay.
The issue is you eat a lot of raw food, there's bacteria in there. There's parasites in there. And the biggest issues they had with their health back in ancestral times was all the parasites, all the bacteria, all the viruses they were picking up. When you cook food, you kill those things. And so we kind of have this, yes, it's kind of against the theory of the Paleo diet, but cooking your foods, and the best way to cook your foods is usually in some sort of cooking oil. It's a cost benefit thing, and making sure you're killing all those things that you don't want to be consuming is worth it. So cooking not vegetable oils, but cooking some oils, but keep it sparing. And
so what do you think about avocado oil or
love it?
ghee?
That's one I use the most.
You do? Good. What about ghee? So ghee is clarified butter.
Ghee is not
Oh, it's not paleo. Yeah, you're right.
We have that argument all the time. So
You're right.
Sorry. No, I have
okay.
people get angry about that and tell us, no, ghee is paleo. And I have to tell them, sorry, it's not.
No, you're right. It's clarified.
Yep.
I think that most of the dairy is cooked out of it. That's what I've read more than once. but it's not paleo. I get it. I
Yeah,
get it.
it's
Because
like wheat.
it's still from a cow.
Yep.
Or milk, still from milk.
Yep.
What about coconut oil? Is that something that you
Love
ever
it.
cook? Okay, good.
Love it. And the other one that we probably recommend the most is olive oil.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I don't cook with, well, especially I don't cook with olive oil at all because it's got a medium cooking point.
right.
Right. So it's about 350. So if I want to flash fry something on really high heat, yeah, I only use olive oil, and I only buy extra virgin olive oil. But I use that in my, dishes that are not, they're room temperature or their dressings. So,
Yep.
I mean, that's why I don't cook with olive oil. But if people, I say, if you cook on medium heat, fine.
Yeah,
Do you agree?
which is true. And there's a lot of health benefits to cooking in low to medium heat as well if you have the patience and the time, because you're going to denature the fats and the proteins less. So if you're cooking in high temperature, use that to sear a little bit, but be careful about cooking too long in high temperatures.
Yeah, no, I agree with you because you really don't want to eat anything that's burnt.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Because you're eating charcoal, right? And that's a toxin.
That is not good for you. And then you start getting into your rages, which you don't want in your diet. So no, it's better to cook on lower heat and cook longer.
Well, awesome. Well, Trevor, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I can't wait to get this out. And I want to ask you about if people want to contact you or ask you questions, can they do that?
Absolutely. And our website is thepaleodiet.com. We try to keep it simple. I'm trying to remember. I think it's help@thepaleodiet.com. If anybody wants to reach out to us, I see all those. But if you go to the contact us on our webpage, you can reach out directly to us.
Okay. And isn't there a book on your website too?
Excited about this. Well, Dr. Cordain has written multiple books. This is his final book, and I was a co-author on it. And it's called Paleo for Life. He really wanted to research the concepts of longevity. And it's a whole book about how nutrition can help you live a longer, healthier life. And what I loved as we were putting together, he really said, there are concepts in here that we missed in the original papers and the original books that are really important concepts that round out the paleo diet. So I think we'll always be evolving the science of the paleo diet. But I do think Dr. Cordain came up with some ideas that ended up in that final book that are major additions to the diet.
That's great. And you got some great recipes on your website.
Well, I hope you. So you said you tried a few, right?
No, I haven't. I looked at them, but I'm gonna try a few.
I recommend them. So I love it. We take pictures, so they cook it here in the office, and then they often come up and like, Trevor, you want to try this? And I'm a horrible chef. I always tell people, I can tell you what to eat. Don't ask me how to cook it, because I just don't know how to cook. And they keep bringing these recipes up, and they're just amazing. I love them.
That's cool. That's cool. All right. Well, can you leave us with one positive message?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to share a story.
Okay.
So I'm now engaged. My fiance and I have been together for a few years, and I'm not somebody to try to force something on anybody. So I've never tried to force her to be paleo, but just living with me for years, she has slowly altered her diet. And when we first started dating, like we would go out to restaurants, and she's like, I don't get why you don't eat the bread. The bread is so good. Or I don't get why you don't eat this. And I could never give up that. And this weekend was the Super Bowl. It was just kind of a given. Like I even do this. I go, during the Super Bowl, I'm not paleo. You just got to eat junk. That's part of the Super Bowl experience. We went to Dairy Queen and got something she used to love at Dairy Queen. And we're on the car ride to go watch the football game at her brother's place. And she just goes, I used to love this. It doesn't taste good anymore. And we had a whole talk about that. And she's like, Yeah, she has been slowly changing her diet, eating more natural foods, adding less salt, all these things that she's kind of seen me do. And it was just a real positive to me to have her suddenly realize my tastes have changed. I actually like healthier food more. The things that I used to just were my favorite thing in the world, they just don't taste good anymore.
Isn't that funny? My taste buds changed when I quit sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like sweets anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for her.
Yeah. So no, it was, to me, I hope that's what you're looking for, but to me, that was just a real positive message. I just absolutely love that.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much for being my guest. This information is going to blow some minds, I think. So anyway, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this.